What's up everyone, WizardKen here with another Xbox 360 World of Tanks video. Today we're going to be comparing the T110E5 versus the IS-7. We're going to figure out which tank is better and which one is the loser. Well, to be honest with you, we'll figure out which one is possibly better and which one is secondary. Today, we're going to look at, we have to split this up into categories of one, just looking at the regular armor of the tanks and the stats of the tanks. Number two, we're going to compare it with the computer stats. We're going to let a computer sit there without the human elements to it, like human error and stuff like that, or human skill with these tanks, and just see with the pure stats of this tanks which one would come on top. And then last but not least, we're going to have the human aspect added into there and figure out which tank, after all that's combined, would be the ultimate tank or the better tank. So first off, let's start with the T110E5. It is a tier 10 American tank. It has 2,200 hit points. It costs about 6 million in silver. Now this thing has a speed limit of 37 kilometers an hour. Now the hull armor is 254 in the front, 76 in the side, and 38 in the rear. The armor on the turret is 203, 127 on the sides, and 70 in the rear. The traverse speed is 32 degrees a second, and the view range is 400 meters. Now this is pretty cool because this tank has everything that you need. It's got great speed, it's got great traverse speed, and it also has a great view range on it. Now the gun on the T110E5 is 120 millimeters. It shoots at a rate of 5 rounds a minute, so it's got a decent speed to it. It does damage about 400 with regular armor piercing rounds, and the penetration with the regular rounds is 258. Now we're not going to use gold rounds in this comparison. We're just going to do standard rounds and just see where the money lands. Now the chances of fire on this thing is about 20%. Now moving on to its vulnerabilities. Of course we've talked about this on our video, but let's just go over it very quickly. Of course, in the front, the bottom plate of this thing is a very exposed area, except you have to shoot at least about a foot underneath it, which I'm showing you with pictures. There's a little area underneath the turret right there where the driver viewports are, where you could shoot and also damage this tank. The hatch of this tank on top of the turret is also a very bulky area to get shot at. I've been shot there tons of times and destroyed because people were able to hit that turret on the top, or the turret hatch on the top. So it is a very vulnerable spot that can be penned. Now looking at the side of this thing, of course, like in between the tracks, if you look at the back right hole of the where the tracks are covering, that's the engine air, which can cause it to catch on fire or destroy the engine. Also in the top left area, or the bottom left area of the tracks where you can see through the hole, is also a nice spot to get ammo racked. As you can see, there is no protection for the tracks whatsoever with this tank. Also the side of the turret and the side of the hatch on the turret is very vulnerable for being shot up and destroyed. Looking at the rear of this tank, you could see also in the very rear of the turret that there is a spot that can be shot to ammo rack this tank. This is one of the spots that I've been blown up a lot, is where someone's gotten behind me and ammo racked me and just completely destroyed me right off the bat. Also the bottom hull spot of this tank is very vulnerable for catching on fire. So the T110, that is the one view, just a quick overview of this tank. Now let's move on to the Russian IS-7. So the IS-7 is one of those tanks that a lot of people like a lot. just like the T110E5. So let's go over just like we did with the T110E5 and just talk about the basics of it. The hit points on this thing is 2,150 hit points. The pricing, the same amount, 6 mil. Speed limit on this thing is 59 kilometers an hour. Now, the whole armor is 150 in the front, 150 in the sides, and 100 in the rear. The turret armor is 240 in the front, 185 in the sides, and 94 in the rear. So the traverse speed, turning left or right, is 25 degrees a second. The view range on this tank is 400 meters. Now, this gun, or this tank, comes with a barrel of 130 millimeters. It is a nasty little barrel. It does 490 damage with standard rounds. It does a penetration of 250. The rate of fire, though, is only 3.89. With, your crew up, you could possibly get to 4 rounds a minute. So, the chances of this thing catching on fire is only 15%. This tank is not a very, it's got some pros and cons to it. It's got a, heavy gun, but a very, very nasty reload time. So, now, looking at this tank, you can see that there's really not too many vulnerable spots in the front. The way the armor is designed is to really be facing your enemy, and it just ricochet a lot of the rounds that come its way. Even a E100 or a Jack Panzer E100 or a T110E3 round can be ricocheted or reflected with this armor. It was the way it was designed, was to help disperse the ammo or the rounds off of itself. The beak nose allows a lot of the rounds to be dispersed off. That's why I didn't need a lot of armor in the front. The way it was designed helped disperse. Now, of course, you can still see that that lower plate is still a nice spot to shoot at. It's not as high up as the IS-8, but it is still a nasty spot that I still get shot at. So protecting that lower plate is a must. There is a little spot on the top left corner. There's a viewport on the top of the turret that can be shot at also, and can damage the tank. But with the roundness of the turret, and the angle of the turret, it is a hard spot to hit. Looking at the side of this tank, now, just like the T110E5, the tracks aren't covered, but that's not the main thing. The main thing is that these sides are kind of exposed, where if you look at the hole, bottom right corner, that's the engine area. Now, it is angled kind of like the front, or like the E100 is, where if you shoot its side, there's a good chance of you just reflecting or ricocheting off. That is a nice development of this tank, is that the sides are very, very angled. The bottom right side of this hole, like I said, could catch on fire. This, from the center of the hole all the way to the front of the hole, can be ammo racked. So those are some deadly spots that are right in the open that aren't protected very well, where the T110 had its ammo, supplies and, and the engine lower. This one is actually showing a little higher than the tracks. So this one, the tracks aren't going to absorb the damage like the T110 would have. There's more chance of you actually getting, hit ammo rack wise and stuff. Now, the side of the turret is also very angled, which allows this tank to ricochet a lot on its side. It can still get penned. There are certain spots on the side, as you can see, that can still be damaged. Now, looking at the rear of this tank, the entire rear of it can be shot at pretty much. The rear of the turret is a very nice spot to shoot, to be able to ammo rack this tank. Now, you still have to worry about the angle of the turret allowing a ricochet to happen. The whole complete hull of this tank can be shot at, but I highly suggest shooting in the middle of the area, because the other spots can actually ricochet also. I've done it before. So that's pretty much the entire tank in a nutshell. So let's look at since we've talked about the basics of these tanks, just looking over them and their basic outlines and stuff like that, let's go and actually get the computer's comparison of what these tanks would do together. Alrighty guys, here we are. This is my little comparison sheet that I use for, you know, discussions that people have, or when I want to get the nitty-gritty of a tank and compare it with another tank. So basically this is going to compare it to all the basic stats of what this tank is. Now in the end it will compare like people's gameplay and stuff like that. In that sense, like it will compare the win ratio and loss ratio of these two tanks compared to how people have played them and stuff like that. That's the only human comparison that we will get. Other than that, other than that, this is strictly just complete, you know, just stats of what these tanks are. No human element involved. So let's go down. So as we've talked about, you know, of course, let's see, prices is 6 mil. We've talked about that. Now who wins in hit points? Hit points right now, the left side is going to be the T110E5, the right side is the IS-7. The T110 wins with hit points of just about 50 hit points more. That's about it. Not a huge difference, something I wouldn't care for too much. Now the signal range, 745 meters compared to the 720, means that, you know, you can pick up more radio range with the T110E5 than you can with the IS-7, which I would actually, you know, say that is a good little difference in there. Now the speed limit, huge differences where the IS-7 comes up on top. Compared to the 37 kilometers, the IS-7 does 59, which is pretty badass. You know, and that is a pretty, you know, pretty huge difference. Now this is the speed limit going backwards. No one really cares about that to an extent, because if you are trying to do peekabooing and stuff like that, this does matter which one can get out of there quicker than the other. But in my book, it's not. For this reason, we're not caring too much. Now weight, 53 tons to 68 tons, doesn't matter. Load time, load limit, sorry, is 60 tons and 70 tons. As you can see, even though the IS-7 has multiple loaders, it is still slower than the T110E5, which we'll show that in a second. Alright, comparing the whole armor and stuff. Now, the whole armor, as we said in the T110E5, is 254 in the front, 76 on the side, and 38 in the rear, where the IS-7 has 150 in the front, 150 in the sides, and 100 millimeters in the rear. Now a lot of people are like, well, of course the T110E5 has better armor and stuff like that, it can take a lot more. We gotta put in comparison that angled armor from the IS-7 is there and can make it a very deadly tank. It doesn't need the armor, it just needs that the type of angling that you know, that big nose angling that allows a lot of dispersing of the other rounds. You know, you don't have to worry about too much damage with this tank, so that's why you don't need the, you know, a lot more weight or a lot more armor, thickness of armor. Going down, of course, we're gonna skip some of these except the traverse speed. You know, the T110E5 can turn just about 2 degrees a second quicker. Not a huge difference. Let's see. Now this is kind of neat. Like, you know, the hard terrain, which is like your regular terrain, there's a little bit of resistance, you know, bumps and stuff like that you're gonna go through. The IS-7, of course, wins in all this because it goes a lot faster than the T110E5. You know, like the soft terrain, like the mud and stuff like that, you know, it's gonna go faster. Now the fire chance, this is interesting. You know, even though that the IS-7 has a more exposed area for the fire, the T110E5 is actually the worst one. I mean, it's only 5%, but that's 5% that you have to worry about, because this thing is gasoline and not diesel. Diesel, a little bit less chance of catching on fire. Gasoline is a little bit more explosive, a little bit, you know, able to ignite a little bit easier than diesel. So, but they're still flammable. That's why there's only like a little bit of a difference, because they still are pretty flammable. So, anyways, view range are the same. Now the turret traverse speed, this is a big thing. Now the T110 can turn its turret at 32 degrees a second, where the IS-7 can only do it at 25 degrees a second, which can actually be a big thing when you're fighting each other and stuff. Now, looking at the ammunition, let's see which one is going to be the badass on this. Now, the hit points of the regular ammo rounds, the regular armor piercing rounds for the T110E5 is 400 hit points. Okay, that's about average. This is not, like I said, this is not calculating rolls or anything like that. This is just purely what one of the rounds, if it, you know, if it just hit, you know, stuff like that. If it just didn't have any rolls or anything like that. If it's just the normal rounds, total hit points that it could do, there's 400 rounds, right, or 400 hit points. The IS-7 does 490, so an extra 90 for the IS-7. The penetration for the T110E5 is 258 with the standard shells, where the IS-7 has 250. Now the T110E5 wins by just 8, but I wouldn't care that it's only 8. Now if it was like 10 or 15 more, I would say something. You know, kind of like the 400 hit points to the 490. That's, to me, they're pretty close to each other. Now, shell pricing, we don't care about that too much. They're pretty much the same. Now the shell speed, this is pretty interesting. The shell speed for the T110E5 is 1067, where the shell speed of the IS-7 is 900, and that's where your penetration kind of helps out a little bit too. Also the shell size and stuff like that changes, but you know, you are having a slower speed with this bigger gun, which doesn't really affect you too much. I mean, it could to an extent, but not really. This is the thing we need to look at, is the damage a minute. 2,400 for the T110E5 because it's got a fucking fast reload, where the IS-7's standard rounds only does 2,146 a minute because it takes a lot longer to reload, which we're going to look at right now. Okay, the rate of fire of the T110E5 is 6 rounds a minute, where the IS-7 is only 4 rounds a minute. Now, the reload time for the like just after you shoot a round is 10 seconds for the T110E5, where the IS-7, as soon as you shoot that round, it's 13.70. That's, of course, we could put different things on there to fucking make this thing go quicker, but this is just your standard thing. Now, this is also, people are like controversy on this thing. They're like, oh, the T110E5's got better accuracy than the IS-7. It does. It's got a 0.35 and then 0.40 for the IS-7. Not that big of a difference, guys. They're both gonna fuck up. They both suck in the sense of accuracy. I mean, it feels like the T110E5 can be a little bit more accurate than the IS-7, but it's not that much. I can still hit people pretty accurately with the IS-7 from a long distance. You know, it just depends on the roll of dice kind of thing. Aim time, now, this one, yes, I would say the aim time for the T110E5 is a hell of a lot better than the IS-7, and it does help it out a lot. Now, let's see, the elevation arc, not worried about that too much. The ammo capacity, of course, who runs out of their fucking rounds? I've never run out, unless I'm arty, I've never run out of rounds on a tank. I rarely ever do it, because I usually either get killed or re-kill everybody else. Now, the camo value. This is actually kind of interesting, even though it's only like, you know, 1% better than the IS-7. You know, it is better, especially in motion. I mean, 3.50 to the 1.25. That means that if you know, the T110E5, you know, is in a, you know, a brushed area, which I have seen this happen, where it's in a nice brushed and treed area and it's moving. I've had problems where I've noticed it at the last minute, where he actually noticed me right off the bat, kind of thing. So that is a huge thing where the T110E5 can dominate the IS-7. It's not a huge thing, and these camo ratings on these tanks aren't the most amazing thing, but it still does help. Anyways, here we go down to the bottom. Battle performances. Now look at these numbers, guys. I want you to look at these numbers. Accuracy of 79.55 to the 79. Pretty dead on with when they're gonna hit and stuff. I believe that's, you know, just the main accuracy throughout the game, like with the rolls in there and stuff like that. They are pretty close to each other, whether they're gonna hit or miss someone. Pretty damn close. And then look at the win ratio. 47.87 to the 48.00. Okay? Fucking close. That's it's not even 1% away from each other. I mean, it's fucking really fucking close. Really fucking close to each other. And then damage dealt per game, 1,757 to 1,687. Now that's just saying, like, you know, if you only get a couple hits in and then you're dead. Kills per battle, 0.823 to 0.79. Come on, look at this. Now we could do more stats, but I'm not gonna get into that because it's a lot more other stuff. But guys, really, this thing is really, in the sense of the computer module, okay, I would have to say that even though it's saying the T110E5 is winning, it's a pretty fucking close match, which is going to lead us into our last segment, the human aspect, the human trials, the errors, the, you know, dumb shit mistakes that we make, and the great, you know, thinking process that we do, and make the game, or the outcome of the game, change dramatically. I have both of these tanks, the T110E5 and the IS-7. Now I've had the IS-7 a lot longer than the T110E5, but I've played the tanks very extensively. I've learned a lot about both tanks. I'm still learning a lot about both tanks. Even the IS-7, even have it for months now. I'm going to be honest with you guys. You guys want to know which one's better, and you guys are going to have your own preferences, and my views are not your guys' views. You guys can think your own thing, and that's great and hunky-dory and fine with me. I'm going to tell you this. In the end, I would choose my IS-7 over the T110E5, but only by like 1%. 1%. And I'll tell you why. It's because it comes down to just, I love the IS-7 in that sense. But if you want my, like, totally plain view of, like, without me liking the Russian tanks, if I just sat there and looked at both of these tanks and see which one would win, to be honest with you, I would sit there and say exactly what the computer said. I would say that it would be a tie, pretty much. I would look at all the stats, I would look at how I played the tanks together, and I've happened in the past. My IS-7 has kicked T110E5's asses a lot, and those the T110E5s have kicked my ass a lot. You wanna know why? Because it depends on the player that you're going against. If I played against myself, like if I could magically play, you know, against myself, one of me in the T110E5 and one of me in the IS-7, I would tell you this, it would come down to the last shot. It would come down to both tanks having only a smidgen of life and coming down to the last shot. These tanks cannot be compared to each other as one being dominant over the other, because it all comes down to your own personal experience. That's it, guys. These tanks, in the end, stat-wise and human-wise, they are just badasses that work great together, that can handle their own, and either one could win the match. Okay? Either one can win a match. It's all in how you play a tank. You guys have seen me, even though my IS-7 has 150 armor on it, I've gone against Jag Panzers E100 straight on and kick their ass, or pretty much came close to kicking their ass, and those things do tons of damage. Tons of damage. You've seen me kick an E100's ass. And you've also seen me in my T110E5 just dominate with that tank. It is a nasty tank. It's got maneuverability like crazy. It's, you know, the turret speed on it is great. I mean, it does have a flaw of having the turret having that massive fucking hatch from hell. But anyways, in the end, guys, my honest opinion is that these tanks would just equal each other out. That's it. They would equal each other out. That's it. I think they're both amazing tanks, and I think they would both win. So the winner is both of them. The IS-7 and the T110E5 are both winners in my book. And I don't think you could sit there and really say one's better than the other. Now, I've heard other people like Commander Shipper saying, yeah, the IS-7 is going to be dominant over there. But it's all in how you play the fucking tank. Because if the T110 plays it smart, you know, he can keep that IS-7 from being able to hit like some of those weak spots, and so can the IS-7. It's a very back and forth game. Yeah, I can't sit here and just keep bringing up different scenarios. So, anyways, guys, I'm WizardKen. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys like this. I'll try to do more of videos like this where you guys want me to compare tanks. Now, of course, this is a rough draft of the videos that I want to produce later on, but I had to start somewhere and see what you guys like, what you don't like, and stuff like that. But I hope I give you guys at least a good enough example of what these tanks can fucking do. Anyways, it's my opinion. You guys can hate me if you want. That's cool. I know you hate me anyway. You just take my money that I pay you to be my subscribers. So alright, guys, anyways, I'm WizardKen. See ya.